Hi there, you're watching Reddit Confessions. This isn't a story about how she broke me. It's a story about how I let her, until I didn't. And the day I disappeared wasn't loud. It was surgical. The picture went missing first. Not a big one. Just a small silver-framed photo that used to sit on our mantle. The one where she was laughing with her head tilted back, and my arm was awkwardly around her like I was trying too hard. That one. It vanished without a word. I noticed it one Monday. I stood there holding a coffee mug I hadn't washed in 3 days, staring at the dust ring where the frame used to be. Not a note. Not a replacement. Just a ghost space. That's when it started. Not with screaming. Not with betrayal bursting through the seams. But with subtraction. Piece by piece, she began erasing me. My book disappeared from the nightstand. The sweatshirt she borrowed and wore for years was suddenly in the laundry, balled up and smelling like cologne that wasn't mine. Her Spotify playlists became private. Our shared calendar turned suspiciously empty. I said nothing, because when you're in the middle of being slowly erased, you start doubting your right to exist. By the end of the week, she stopped eating dinner at home. I'd cook anyway, dumb meals like spaghetti with no sauce, just butter and salt, because it felt like something. I'd eat mine. I'd plate hers. And then I'd scrape hers into the trash at 11:23 p.m. when the garage door still hadn't opened. One night, I left a sticky note next to her untouched plate. "Do I still exist to you?" She never responded. Just tossed it in the trash the next morning next to a lipstick-stained napkin and a receipt from a rooftop bar I'd never heard of. For 2 drinks. One marked old-fashioned. One lemon drop martini. I don't drink old-fashions. But someone does. And still, I didn't explode. That's what makes this story different from most. I never confronted her. I never yelled. I didn't ask who he was. I just listened to the silence. I watched her get ready for a late meeting in heels that clicked like gunshots on our hardwood floor. I smiled like a corpse and said, "Drive safe." The morning she told me she was done, she didn't even sit down. She stood at the door, halfway into her coat, bag in hand like she had a taxi waiting outside. "I think we've outgrown this. I'm done, Milo." She said my name like it tasted bad in her mouth. I didn't say a word. I just nodded. Then I reached behind me and slid that same empty silver frame into my pocket. It was never about the picture. It was about remembering the space she left behind. And as she walked out for good, heels echoing down our driveway like punctuation marks, I didn't cry. I locked the door from the inside and started parting with things, not out of anger, but with a quiet grace she never gave me. And that was just the beginning. I didn't pack a bag. That's what everyone expects in these stories, right? The betrayed husband tosses his essentials into a duffel and disappears into the night. But I didn't give her that kind of drama. Drama meant she'd get to feel like the victim. And I wasn't handing her that satisfaction. Instead, I started erasing myself, methodically, intentionally. I canceled the joint gym membership without a word. She wouldn't notice. She hadn't stepped foot in that place in months unless it was to flirt with the tattooed trainer she thought I didn't know about. I removed my profile from our streaming accounts, disconnected my Spotify from the Bluetooth in her car, and deleted the old shared photo albums from the cloud. Not everything, just mine. Just enough to make her feel like something was missing without knowing what it was. The next day, I woke up before dawn. Not to leave, but to watch. She got ready like usual. Curled hair, lipstick just slightly too bright for a budget review meeting. She walked past me like I was part of the furniture. I almost admired her commitment to the lie. She grabbed her keys, her perfume, and paused just before the door. "Don't wait up," she said, smirking without turning around. I didn't. I wouldn't. Once she left, I stood in the hallway and listened to the quiet click of the deadbolt. Then I opened the drawer beneath the hallway mirror, the one she forgot I knew about. I pulled out the shoebox labeled Charity, Winter Clothes. Inside, beneath an old scarf and gloves, were hotel receipts. 7 of them. Same hotel. Different dates. Always weeknights. Always booked for 2. In the smallest corner of my heart, I hoped maybe it was just a friend. A spa thing. A solo getaway. But I already knew the truth. I'd known for a while, but hope is a funny parasite. It dies last. I took a photo of each receipt. Not for blackmail. Not even for divorce court. Just for me. So I could stop gaslighting myself into thinking I was imagining it all. I needed the facts because love made me blind, and heartbreak made me paranoid. Then I found the last piece. A note. Folded up. torn from a hotel notepad. Thursday was perfect. I wish you didn't have to go home to him. No signature. No name. But she had underlined perfect 3 times in pink ink. That's when the shaking started in my hands. Not from rage, from reality. The kind of trembling that happens when your body starts catching up to what your heart already knows. When you realize the woman who used to fall asleep on your chest now only wants you as a name on a lease and a Wi-Fi bill. I didn't cry. I just sat on the floor, surrounded by receipts and someone else's version of perfect, and let the numbness crawl in like fog. I looked at the time. 6:57 p.m. That's when I made my decision. Not to fight, not to confront, not to beg, but to vanish in plain sight. And I knew exactly where to begin. I didn't call a lawyer. Not yet. That would have felt too formal, too final. What I needed first was distance. Not just physical, but mental. I didn't want to be the guy sobbing to a stranger in a glass office, listing grievances like some sad checklist. I wanted clarity. And to get it, I needed to disappear without ever leaving. So I started with my routine. Every Tuesday and Friday, I'd pick up groceries after work. Always the same store, always the same list. But the next Friday, I didn't go. I went home early instead, parked around the corner, and waited in my car. At 6:34 p.m., a car I'd never seen before pulled into the driveway. A sleek, low-sitting convertible. He got out like he owned the place. She came out seconds later, hair down, wine in hand, already laughing. They didn't see me. Or maybe they didn't care. She kissed him in the driveway. Right there. Not the kind of kiss you give someone who's just a friend. It was the kind that says, "This is my real life." I stayed until the porch light flicked off. Then I drove 2 towns over and slept in my car in the parking lot of a 24-hour laundromat. Just sat there, surrounded by the hum of dryers and flickering fluorescents, watching people clean their messes while I sat in mine. The next morning, I returned home like nothing happened. She was in the kitchen, humming. She'd made pancakes. "You're up early," she said, smiling too brightly. "Didn't sleep much," I mumbled, grabbing a glass of water. "Thought I'd get a head start on yard work." She didn't question it. That weekend, I spent hours at the library. I wasn't reading novels or doing research. I was learning how to vanish. Quietly. Completely. I learned how to deactivate accounts without triggering alerts, how to forward mail to A.P.O. box, how to change banks, how to slowly liquidate assets without red flags. All legal. All clean. I even found a loophole to freeze our joint credit card without notifying the other holder. Suspicious activity flag. One call. She'd think it was the bank's doing. Every night, I'd return home, sleep beside her like we weren't 2 ghosts haunting the same bed. She'd scroll through her phone while I stared at the ceiling. Some nights, I'd catch her smiling at texts. Other nights, she'd fall asleep in her clothes. I never asked. I just waited. And then, I started taking things from the house. Slowly. A book here. A watch there. My birth certificate. A few framed photos. I replaced them with lookalikes from thrift stores, same size, same shape. She didn't notice. Or she pretended not to. I watched as my presence faded from the house, and she never once asked why my side of the closet was getting emptier. She had already replaced me emotionally. I was just returning the favor physically. Then came the final piece. The note. I wrote it late one night, sitting in the basement, surrounded by cardboard boxes and leftover wedding decorations we never used. It simply said, "You said you were done, so I finished the job for you." I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. Because when she found that note a week later, on the morning of her birthday, taped to the inside of her jewelry box, she would realize something far scarier than betrayal. That I had been preparing my goodbye for weeks, and she had missed every single sign. And by then, it would be too late. The morning of her birthday started with sun through the blinds and the smell of brewed coffee. Just like every year, I made her favorite, light roast, oat milk, 2 sugars, and set it next to the vase of white lilies she always pretended to love. She wasn't up yet. Or maybe she was just pretending to sleep, waiting to be adored. But this year, there would be no breakfast in bed, no card, no gifts hidden behind the curtains. Just a folded note waiting in her jewelry box, the one I knew she always opened first, because it wasn't really about the jewelry. It was about control. She needed to feel wanted. Needed that little jolt of joy from a new necklace or bracelet to start her day. I used to provide that. This time, she'd find something else. I stood across the street, parked behind a dry-cleaning van, watching our house as if it wasn't mine anymore. I could see through the front window. She walked into the kitchen around 8:02 a.m., phone already in hand, scrolling. She didn't notice anything different at first. Just another morning with a husband too quiet, and a coffee she assumed was a peace offering. Then, at 8:17, she turned around. Paused. Her brows furrowed. She opened the drawer. Jewelry box. The note. Her lips moved as she read it. Once. Twice. Then came the silence. The kind that stretches across skin. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She sat down, slowly, like her knees stopped working. She stared into the air like something had been pulled from her, something she didn't even realize she needed until it was gone. And I felt nothing. Not anger. Not joy. Just the strange relief of absence. By 9 a.m., I was already on the highway. I'd canceled my cell service the night before and left my phone in the freezer, battery removed. I had $6,000 in cash, the car title in the glove box, and a one-way rental agreement to a city neither of us had ever mentioned in all our years together. That was the beauty of it. I didn't need to start over. I just needed to stop existing in her version of my life. Later that day, she tried to call me. Landline. Twice. She even texted my sister, asked if I was with her, said I was being dramatic, that it was just a rough patch. My sister didn't respond. Not because she was angry with me, but because she already knew everything. You see, Celine thought she was orchestrating some grand, quiet departure. But I'd already rehearsed mine to perfection. I wasn't just walking away. I was scrubbing myself from the foundation of her world. Bank accounts? Already closed. Utilities? All transferred to her name. My car? Sold and registered out of state under a cousin's name she didn't even know I still spoke to. The photos we took on our anniversary trips? Digitally wiped from our drives. The prints? I left them in a brown envelope in her car, each one marked on the back. I saw what you did after this. That was the thing. She thought she'd burned down our marriage in secret. But all along, I'd been quietly building the exit. Not for revenge. Not for drama. But because you can only be erased for so long before you stop begging to be seen, and decide instead to disappear on your own terms. And she still didn't know what was coming next. Because some of the lies she told weren't hers alone. And I wasn't the only one who'd been watching. I used to believe that when things fall apart, they do it like glass, suddenly, violently, with pieces everywhere. But when I watched Celine unravel, it wasn't like that at all. It was slow, deliberate, like wallpaper peeling in a quiet room. You don't hear it, but one day the walls are bare and you don't remember when it started. By the time she found out I was truly gone, bank accounts drained, credit cards locked, keys missing, it had already been 4 days. I wasn't watching anymore. I didn't need to. The last camera I left in the hallway was triggered once at 1:14 a.m. She was pacing barefoot, on the phone, yelling at someone. Probably a friend. Maybe a lawyer. I don't know. I deleted the feed after I saw her throw the picture frame against the wall. The same one that used to hold our wedding photo. Now just shattered glass and splinters. But this part of the story, this is where it changes. Because I wasn't the only one keeping records. See, Celine had secrets. Yes, but she also had allies. People who encouraged her, supported her lies, and helped her build the illusion. One of them, her closest confidant, was the person I least expected, her sister, Camille. Camille was always the loud one. Dramatic. Wore too much perfume and called every man sweetheart. I used to think she was harmless, just a little flaky. But 2 days after I left, she messaged me. No, hello. No, are you okay? Just, you did the right thing. Call me when you're ready to see what else she lied about. I stared at that message for an hour. Then I called. She didn't hesitate. She didn't sugarcoat it. She told me everything. Apparently, Celine's affair wasn't new. It wasn't a fling. It was a pattern. Camille had covered for her 3 times in the past. 3 different men. Each time, Celine swore it would be the last. Each time, she blamed me, said I was emotionally distant, too passive, safe but boring. Camille finally got tired of it when Celine started seeing someone married. A guy named Brent. The same guy from the rooftop bar receipts. The same guy whose wife had just filed for divorce 3 weeks ago. You think she only broke your heart? Camille said. She's made it her sport. I sat on the motel bed with that phone pressed to my ear, trying to piece together how many versions of Celine had existed without me noticing. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was practicing for it, polishing the script, perfecting the lies. She only ever loved the version of you that didn't speak up, Camille added. That line hit hard, because it was true. All those years I stayed quiet to keep the peace, to avoid confrontation, to give her space. I wasn't being noble. I was making myself small enough to fit inside her shadow. Not anymore. Before we hung up, Camille sent me something else. A photo. Celine. In our backyard. At the last 4th of July party. Laughing with Brent. Hands a little too close. Smiles a little too intimate. It was right there in front of me, and I never saw it. Because when someone loves you with conditions, you start living like a hostage. I didn't reply to Camille. I didn't need to. I just opened a new folder on my encrypted drive. Labeled it Truths I Missed. And as I stared at the screen, a thought formed so clearly it felt like it had been waiting all along. She thought she'd ruined me. But what she didn't know was that I'd finally become someone impossible to manipulate. And for the first time in years, I felt like someone again. There's something strange that happens when no one says your name for a while. You start to forget how it sounds. You start to forget who you were when people used to say it with love, with warmth, or even just familiarity. For weeks after I left, no one called me Milo. Not even me. I was just gone. But that changed the moment I stepped into the place I swore I'd never return to, my childhood home. It wasn't planned. I didn't have some emotional revelation while driving. I was low on gas, out of money, and needed somewhere to vanish for a few days. My mother's house had been abandoned since she passed 2 years ago. No one had touched it. The utilities were off. The mailbox was crammed with grocery store coupons and expired election flyers. But I still had the key, buried in the lining of my old backpack. Rusted, bent, but it still worked. The moment the door creaked open, the smell hit me. That musty, time-frozen scent of a house nobody loves anymore. It was cold. The floorboards sighed under my weight like they remembered me. I dropped my bag and sat on the floor. No mattress. No heat. Just silence. And for the first time in months, I let it happen. I broke down. Not like in the movies. No screaming into the night. No fists pounding the walls. I just cried. Quiet, ugly sobs that came from a part of me I hadn't visited in years. I wasn't crying for Celine. I was crying for the version of me that stayed too long. The man who begged for scraps and called it love. The boy who believed silence was strength. And as strange as it sounds, I think that house absorbed it. Let me pour all of it out. No judgment. No interruptions. Just the sound of my name slowly coming back to me inside my head. Milo. That night, I slept on the floor using my coat as a blanket and my duffel bag as a pillow. And in the middle of the night, I had a dream. One of those weird, uncomfortable dreams where nothing is real, but everything feels important. In the dream, I was in our house, mine and Celine's, but everything was upside down. Furniture on the ceiling, photos on the floor. She walked in holding a birthday cake with someone else's name on it, and said, "I kept waiting for you to leave." And I said, "I left a long time ago." I woke up with my heart pounding, and I knew what I had to do. I wasn't done yet. See, Celine still believed she'd ended things. She thought her words, "I'm done," were the finish line. But what she never realized is that real endings don't come with announcements. They come when the other person quietly reclaims their identity. I left that house with something I hadn't carried in years, purpose. And I drove. Not toward her. Not toward vengeance. Toward the one place that could close the circle. Brent's home. Yes. Him. The married man. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to cause a scene. I just needed the truth to exist somewhere outside of my own mind. So I parked down the street. Waited until I saw the porch light go off. And then I slid a simple envelope into his mailbox. Inside, a photo of him and Celine on our back porch. Dated. Signed only with a single sentence. "Your wife deserves to know the truth too." I didn't wait to see what happened next. I didn't need to. Because finally, I was writing the story on my own terms. And I was no longer afraid of the sound of my own name. 2 weeks after I dropped that envelope into Brent's mailbox, I was still waiting for the aftershock. Part of me expected sirens at my door, or a screaming voicemail, or even just a cryptic Facebook post about betrayal. But nothing came, not even a whisper. And that silence was louder than any confrontation could have been. I'd settled into a small, furnished sublet on the edge of a coastal town no one had heard of. Population just under 1,200. The kind of place where strangers wave just for existing. Where the air smells like salt and pine, and the radio still plays old jazz after 10 p.m. My phone was still off. My name wasn't on any lease. I paid rent in cash. There were no digital breadcrumbs. It was like I'd never existed in the life I left behind. And I should have felt peace. But peace is a strange thing when you've lived in emotional warfare for so long. You don't feel it at first. You wait for it to hurt. You flinch at kindness. You question rest. I kept checking my email out of habit, even though I had nothing synced. I'd wake up at 4 a.m. and instinctively listen for the sound of Celine's blow dryer or the hum of her morning blender. Ghost routines. Echoes from a life I'd already buried. Then, one afternoon it came. A message. Not from Celine. Not from Brent. But from her. Brent's wife. It was a private email sent through a secondary account. The subject line was blank. The body was just a single line. I knew. But now I know everything. Thank you. I stared at that message like it was a riddle. No follow-up. No threat. No bitterness. Just closure. A stranger gave me more honesty in one sentence than Celine did in 10 years. Later that day, I got another message, this time from Camille. She'd been quiet for a while. Said she didn't want to push, that I deserved space. But now she was reaching out again. Her message was longer, and it shook me more than I expected. She told me that after I vanished, Celine started spiraling. Not publicly. Of course, Celine would never give the world the satisfaction of seeing her lose control. But behind the scenes, she was unraveling. Brent ghosted her. His wife had taken their kids and moved out. Their social circle turned cold. Even her job, which she thought was bulletproof, had become unstable thanks to some messy overlap between her meetings and company policy. She's alone, Camille wrote. And she's scared. I didn't know how to feel. The version of me from 6 months ago would have rushed back, cape in hand, trying to fix her broken world. But that man was gone, replaced by someone who no longer mistook sacrifice for love. I wrote back to Camille with a short reply. Let her be scared. I was scared for years. I didn't mean it cruelly. I meant it honestly. It was the first time I'd ever let myself acknowledge how much pain I had tolerated in silence. How much I had endured to keep an illusion alive. And now that it was gone, I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. But the final twist? It came just a few days later. I walked into the post office to check the new P.O. box I had set up under an alias. Inside was a single white envelope. No return address. Just my fake name, handwritten in neat, familiar cursive. I opened it on the sidewalk. Inside, a note. I never thought you'd actually go. I thought you were bluffing. I thought you'd always be there. I don't know who I am without you. Please, if there's still a version of us somewhere, let me find it again. See, no apology, no ownership, just a plea built on the assumption that I was still the man who waited. I folded the letter, walked back inside the post office, and dropped it directly into the paper shredder by the counter. Because the version of me she remembered? He didn't live here anymore. The final part of this story doesn't end with fireworks or fury. There's no dramatic courtroom scene. No explosive confrontation in a crowded cafe. Instead, it ends the same way it truly began, quietly. Intentionally. With me choosing myself in a way I never had before. After shredding Celine's letter, I walked out of the post office and kept going. No pause. No second thought. It felt like shedding the last wet layer of a storm-soaked coat I'd worn for years. And the sun felt different on my face that day. Not warmer, just real. I got a job at a hardware store owned by an old retired mechanic named Russ. He didn't ask questions, just looked me up and down and said, "You know how to use a socket wrench?" I nodded. He handed me a red apron and said, "Start Monday." Simple. Human. I began building routines I never had before, not the kind built around someone else's needs or moods, but around peace. I'd walk the coast each evening, always passing the same diner, where eventually the same server began recognizing me. Her name's Josie. She has a voice like vinyl and always slips an extra spoon of whipped cream on my pie when she thinks I look tired. We haven't talked about our pasts, and that's okay. Sometimes healing doesn't need storytelling. It needs quiet companionship and someone who remembers how you take your coffee. One evening, I sat on the back porch of my new rental, barefoot, wrapped in an old quilt, and realized I hadn't thought about Celine all day. Not once. Not her voice. Not her perfume. Not the ache. I smiled. Because that silence? That was mine now. I don't hate her. I don't wish her pain. I just don't wish her anything. She's no longer the center of my world. She's just a page in a chapter I've finished reading. And I hope she figures herself out someday. But she'll have to do it without me. Because the man who used to break himself just to keep her comfortable, he finally went home, to himself. So if you're listening to this, and you're somewhere in the in-between, waiting for someone to notice your pain or fix their lies, hear me clearly. You do not owe anyone your silence. You do not have to be the one who stays. You are allowed to start again. And sometimes the greatest revenge is simply living a good life they never get to witness. Thanks for sticking around till the end. If this story hit close to home, we'd love to hear from you. Tell us, was there a moment in this journey that reminded you of someone you used to be, or someone you had to let go of? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more raw, real, and emotional stories right here on Reddit Confessions. We'll see you in the next one.